Αγνή παρθένε δέσποινα, αχράντε Θεοτόκε.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Orthodox Logos, aka Road to Paradise. My name is Ian Silver. I'm here with my co-host Nathaniel Harmon.
Greetings.
And today we're going to be doing some hagiographies, so to speak, featuring Saint Brendan the Navigator, also known as Saint Brendan the Voyager, and also
We're going to be doing the Venerable Bede, or Saint Bede of Jarrow, who is a really awesome saint. And actually, if you know anything about saints and you didn't grow up Orthodox or Catholic, he's probably one of the only Anglo-Saxon saints you know, if you studied history at all. But he's an awesome saint. Before we get started on that, though, Ian, do we have any updates?
yeah, so we now are at like 13 Patreon members, so things have been cruising along nicely. Glory to God.
Indeed.
And
We made quite a splash with our TikTok review of Pagans of TikTok, which was a unequivocally unpleasant experience.
yeah, I did not have a good time.
Which makes me happy because you were trying to torment me. And
Yeah,
I think I won't say I handled it better than you, but you had at least as little fun as I did.
I did not sleep well. I was having visions of things,
Of neon pagans.
neon pagans. But yeah, this I haven't completely decided whether or not this is going to be Patreon exclusive. At least it will be for early access, and then
Right.
if we decide to throw it up on YouTube later on, we will. But as far as Patreon, right now there's no distinction necessarily between tiers. Obviously, if you're donating $20, we're gonna work something out.
But
But
you do get PDF copies of the Orthodox Logos at that
Yeah.
point,
yeah, and
which is the magazine.
yeah, and then so right now we're kind of just letting things flow. If you become a Patreon member, no matter what you're donating, you're getting exclusive access. But here shortly, we're going to kind of change things. You know, if you're donating $1, you get exclusive access to one video a month and early access to everything. And then, you know, $5, $10, $20, more videos, more access, handwritten letters from Dawkin. Me and him have been talking about that. Me and Nathan might write some things. Maybe we'll send you some icons if that is something we come across, or prayer bracelets from the monastery. Just little gifts and
Beard
whatnot.
oil, beard balm,
Yeah.
stuff like that. If you're a dude, if you're not,
Sorry. Yeah.
The whole discussion with of Dawkin doing some work with us is also leads us to another update that's still very much in the planning stage. But do you have anything you want to say about that, Ian, or should we keep that on the down low for the time?
No, yeah, I think it's a good thing. Me and Nathan, you know, obviously he's a writer, and I'm kind of trying to find my way back into literature in general. I appreciate it, and I have a mind for it. I'm not sure if I have the right skills to actually make it come alive on paper, but you know, there's a lot of great Orthodox artists, authors out there. So if you're an author, reach out to us. We are planning, and we are going to be starting a publishing company under
Road to
the
Paradise Publishing is what it's going to be called, and we'll have to design a logo for it or something like that. But
Yeah, so you not only maybe there'll even be some other things available through Road to Paradise, but we're going to focus on, you know, kind of telling beautiful stories with Orthodox artists or Christian artists if they're, you know, their storytelling is in line with what we believe, or if it's a beautiful story. I think it's something that the world needs. So that's where our focus is going to be. Anything you want to say about it?
with that, we will be offering editing services, and if you're wanting to try to write fiction, we'll be doing book development stuff as well. So that will be something where you'll be interacting. And I don't know if Dawkins on board for this yet, but you'll be reaching out to me and to Ian, and we'll be helping you with that stuff. And like I said, if you have manuscripts that you want proofread or edited to be and then to be published by us, we will provide those services for you. So it's stepping out on a limb for all of us, because one of the things I've noticed about Ian is that he's like, I'll sit there and talk about all kinds of interesting ideas, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did X, Y, or Z thing? And if I have the misfortune of having Ian overhear that comment, he will say, okay, so we're doing that next week, right?
Or I'll send you a logo for something, or
So yeah, we're doing this now. I'm like, I was more happy to keep it in my headspace and not actually do anything with it, because I'm full of ideas with no motivation to perform the ideas. But now we're having to do that, so it'll be interesting, and your prayers will be appreciated. And if you have anything you would like to submit, be it poetry or short stories or some sort of philosophical reflection,
art. If
or
you're an
something like that, yeah,
artist, and we're going to need illustrations for certain things. I know Dawkin has some stuff in the works where it's going to be more of like a, like Jonathan Pajot's doing the God's Dog. I can't think, it's kind of like a comic, or like a, I don't know the exact word, but yeah, I'm going to stop saying like a.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting. And like I said, if you have a series of short stories you want to publish into an anthology, let us know, and we'll see what we can do for you.
And Nathan, hopefully with the blessing of our spiritual father, is going to be doing Synaxarion.
With the blessing of our spiritual father, if that works out, the Western saints, specifically the ones that we're talking about right now, the Welsh, the British saints, some of the French saints, that are of a slightly more contemporary period than, say, 275, are not well represented in our Synaxarions and in our saints' lives. So, you'll see Saint Bridget in there, you'll see Saint Patrick, you'll see Saint Vincent of Lerone, you'll see Saint Augustine of Canterbury, you'll see sometimes Saint Bede, but I don't think I've ever come across a hagiography that has, say, Saint Gildas in it. And I've certainly never seen one with Saint Winifred in it.
Yeah.
You'll see Saint Brendan the Navigator on occasion, but these are not stories that are well known in the orthosphere, for lack of a better phrase, and I would very much like them to be known, because it's a real bloody shame that the Roman Catholics, no offense to any Roman Catholic listeners, but it's a shame that everyone goes, oh, Saint Patrick is a Roman Catholic saint, or Saint Winifred's a Roman Catholic saint. It's like, well, yes, but also no. And we need to be studying those stories as well, much in the same way that they could do to study some of our Eastern stories. They don't know as much about, say, Saint Mary of Egypt as would be agreeable, or I'm trying to think of some other, some of the early Muslim, or some of the early martyrs to Islamic oppression. Some of these saints aren't as well known, and that's a shame.
Yeah, so that's why we're trying to shed some light on them and give us an opportunity to learn more as well. I'll share some links. I just ran across some audio titled "The Uniqueness of Celtic Monasticism," a lecture by Hieromonk Ambrose.
Oh, Father Alexei Young. He was one of Father Seraphim's disciples.
So it says, this is recorded at the Hermitage of Holy Cross. The engaging lecture demonstrates how Celtic monasticism of the pre-schism British Isles was essentially the same as that of the Eastern deserts in all respects, save one very striking characteristic, which is obviously, I'm assuming, the desert.
Right.
Father Ambrose brings to light this characteristic of Celtic monks from their own writings and shows how this one trait brought these brave souls to American continent as early as the 6th century. So maybe not the fact that they weren't desert fathers, something else that's unique about Celtic monasticism. So I'll put that in the description. It's four different sections, 20 minutes each, 10 minutes each. So
that's awesome. I did not know that those, I've heard about those lectures, but I didn't know they were available.
Yeah, I bookmarked them so
that's
we
awesome.
can listen to them. And then I found some more stuff on St. Brendan's journey and immigration that we might be able to read from a Canadian Orthodox website. So
this looks like it was made in like 1995.
Is that bad?
No, it just making me feel old.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into this, and we'll start with Saint Brendan, the Navigator, also known as Saint Brendan the Voyager, who was a 6th century Irish Orthodox monk and perhaps the first Orthodox Christians to set foot on Canadian soil, and as such is the first of the saints to set foot in North America. He is also known as Brendan of Clonfert. He is remembered by the church on May 16th, so we're trying to
Stick with the month theme at least,
yeah.
even if we don't get the day.
Within a month or two at least. So with the life of St. Brendan, he was born around 484 at Tralee in Kerry, Ireland. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. He founded several monasteries in Ireland, including Clonfert. Yeah. There's a lengthy name for it I'm not going to try to butcher. In County Galway, his missionary and pastoral travels took him on voyages to the Scottish Islands and possibly to Wales. He reposed in peace in 577. A Latin chronicle of the early 9th century, known as the Voyage of Brendan, made him the hero of a Christian adventure that included voyages to unknown lands far to the west of Ireland. This account indicates that Irish voyagers visited America as early as the 8th century, before the Vikings. But whether St. Brendan himself made these voyages is disputed, based mainly on questions as to whether a curragh, which is a sea craft that St. Brendan sailed on, would be able to even make such a journey. But as we know, even if we look at like stuff with the Vikings, some of the stuff they sailed on was able to make it. So I'm sure an Orthodox saint, with the grace of God, could travel over some treacherous waters. In 1976, Irish explorer Tim Severin built an ox leather curragh, a replica of the sort Brendan would have used, and over 2 summers sailed from Ireland via the Hebrides. Sorry, you told me that prior to recording. which the Faroe Islands and Iceland to Newfoundland, to demonstrate that the saints' purported voyage was feasible. In other words, saying that it was something that could have potentially happened.
Right.
He encountered various sights such as icebergs and sea animals such as whales and porpoises, which he suggests are factual counterparts to the fantastic sights from the legends of Brendan. And then, if there's anything you want to say, because then we could I don't mind reading Brendan's journey in immigration. It seems pretty interesting.
I'm interested in that. So one of the things that I think is interesting about this is there is actually a Irish counterpart to this that may even be older, if not roughly contemporaneous, and that is called the Voyages of Madoc. And there's this old Irish tradition, this old medieval Irish tradition, that Irish explorers went to some land that was in the west across the Atlantic Ocean. So this is quite far from being just some random thing saying, oh, well, he said he went west and found some land. That's just completely absurd. No one would ever think that at that point in time. It's like, well, we can talk about some really curious historical incidences, but I'm not going to right now because they sound very crazy and I don't have the technical expertise to explain them well. But depending on where you look and how far back you go, there is at least somewhat compelling evidence that there has been a robust trade, or at least series of interactions between Europe and America for a whole lot longer than we ever thought was possible.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I won't say anything else to encourage people in their materialism. Yeah,
and then one of the things he's primarily renowned for is the legendary quest, which we're speaking of, to the Isle of the Blessed, which is now denominated as St. Brendan's Island, which we might learn about more in this short writing on the journey of him.
Interestingly, did you know that Tolkien wrote a poetic ending to the Voyage of St. Brendan?
I heard that on Amansul.
Yep.
I believe they read it on there.
Mm-hmm. Or at least part of it. It's pretty cool.
He used factual information or, canonical information, but he kind of had his own little twist, I guess you could say, on it. Maybe we can find that.
I have no idea what it's called.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty cool poem.
I'll look for it in a minute when you're reading. So St. Brendan's journey and immigration. This is a short article. I'll skim through this real quick, and then I'll have Nathan read the Venerable Bede, because there's a lot of things I'll probably mispronounce. So this gives me a chance to skip that. So it starts with the prayer of St. Brendan, which goes like this. Shall I abandon, O King of mysteries, the soft comforts of home? Shall I turn my back on my native land and turn my face towards the sea? Shall I put myself wholly at thy mercy, without silver, without a horse, without fame, and without honor? O King of the glorious heaven, shall I go of my own choice upon the sea? O Christ, wilt thou help me on the wild waves? So, yeah, that's a prayer of St. Brendan. Brendan. I want to say that clearly, not Brennan. So it is often said that Canada is a nation of immigrants. More than perhaps any nation in the history of the world, the Canadian population is made up of those born outside her borders, those whose first loyalties were and even still are in another place, and whose homeland, the old country, in quote, is far, far away. Canadian civil culture is the culture of the immigrant, the man or woman or family who comes to the new country to seek a better material life, to flee from the dangers of war, persecution, or famine, to build a happier future for their children. On a certain level, all Canadians share this dream and hope and would not begrudge it to others who come to our shore with the same honest aspirations. And, that all sounds great, and maybe once upon a time that was the case, but obviously in both America and Canada, we see that that's not necessarily what's going on.
Not so anymore.
Yeah, not to get politically, but you guys know what we're talking about. But is this a Christian hope? Unlike the American Puritans who crossed the ocean in search of religious freedom, most Orthodox Christians in the West did not come to North America to practice their faith or to share it with others. They came for the land, for the jobs, for the prosperity and freedoms that would allow them to build a home, open a restaurant, enjoy weekends off from work. The idea of building a common culture with every neighbor, knit together by a common faith and language, common values and common hopes, was left behind, exchanged for the shared culture of the marketplace. We see it in our conversations today, where neighbors of different cultural backgrounds avoid talk of spiritual or political questions, preferring to discuss home improvements, shopping, bargain, hunting, etc., etc. From those who 2 generations ago professed Orthodox Christianity as a center of life in the homeland, we have become something very, very different indeed. I agree with a lot of that.
Yep.
We definitely have become something very different. The 6th century Orthodox monk, St. Brendan, was perhaps the first Orthodox Christian to set foot on Canadian soil, as we mentioned previously, and as such is the first of the saints of North America, known as the Voyager, since he undertook with his monastic brethren a unique pilgrimage across the ocean, one whose goal was truly a better life, not materially speaking, but a life fully trusting in Christ for his daily bread, for the path ahead of him, and for his safety in his very life. St. Brendan's company continued the practice of Orthodox Christian Celts of their time, called peregrinatio,
I think.
a kind of pilgrimage, with the destination left entirely up to Providence. As an act of faith, much like the ascetics of the Egyptian desert, these monks left the comfort of their home and chartered a small boat laden with limited rations, their sails set for no direction in particular. They trusted completely in the destination God chose for them, whether it was a harrowing journey, some distant shore, or death at sea. This unique kind of self-imposed martyrdom, unique to the Orthodox Celts, but one in spirit with the deserts of Egypt, the forests of Russia, and the mountains of Greece and Serbia, was a call suited to only a few souls out of thousands. Yet the same spirit of complete reliance on God and the determination to place Christ at the center of every decision is not at all unique to the Orthodox Celts or to monastics. It is central to the life of every authentic Orthodox Christian. It is common to hear members of Orthodox parishes of immigration express their sadness that their children and grandchildren have lost their culture and their faith as well. In fact, this is not entirely true. For many, indeed for most, the goals of a better house, bigger property, successful business, and more material wealth have been successfully passed from one generation to the next, and we definitely see that nowadays, virtually uninterrupted by the practice of the Orthodox faith. The same purpose that was behind much of the immigration of our ancestors, wherever they came from and whenever they came, has been, with a few exceptions, successfully handed on to each generation. The real question now the only real question for Orthodox Christians, is whether the central goal in crossing the great oceans to come to Canada was an Orthodox Christian goal at all. For St. Brendan and his company, the first Orthodox Christians in Canada, the purpose of the trip was clear. For us, immigrants and the children of immigrants, we must ask only if we are the inheritors of the legacy of the saints who made the dangerous journey to this land, or whether we are the inheritors of the spirit of the shopping malls, which steal away so much of our heritage, our time, our children, and our hopes. St. Brendan, pray for us. I really like that last part, especially as a first-generation American. It's like, And we've talked about legacy and
Right.
carrying on a legacy, and it's not like how big is your house compared to your grandfather's house. It's, are you working as hard as your grandfather did to provide for your family, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, this actually ties into something that Ian and I were talking about earlier. And the modern West has stolen our sense of numinous awe of the world. And really destroyed our sense of our place in the universe, in the cosmos, right? And one of the ways that we can see that is that article that Ian just read discusses the notion of a couple of monks or a couple of, just Christian laity, maybe even getting into a small boat with a few provisions, knowing they have provisions that are inadequate to any kind of great voyage, and casting themselves adrift on the tides of God's will in a very literal sense, right? That could lead to them ending up back at home, or to them dying in a storm at sea, or ending up somewhere they've never been or even heard of.
Such is life.
And we've kind of lost that sense, because to us the ocean is dangerous, but it is known, right? There are things about it that we don't understand, but if I am sitting in if I'm sitting at some sort of port in Western Ireland, and I point the ship, and I decide I'm gonna jump into a kayak or something like that. Actually, there was a Polish guy that's done this a number of times, who's kayaked across the North Atlantic and the Central and Southern Atlantic. Like, yeah, he's doing something crazy, but he knows exactly what's out there, right? And he knows where he's going, and he knows what's on the other side. These men didn't know that, and they had to rely entirely on God. They couldn't do the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and take control of your destiny. I forget who wrote the poem Invictus, but they couldn't do the Invictus thing and say, I am the captain of my fate, right? And we like to do that nowadays, and this is really well exemplified in this movie that just came out called Moonfall, which, I'll not lie, I haven't seen the entire thing, but when I got home last night, my roommate was watching it, so I watched the last little bit of it with him. And if it was a good movie, I would feel bad about spoiling it, but it's a horribly humanistic and atheist movie, so I don't feel bad about spoiling it. But it ends with this whole notion that ancient humans built the moon, and the moon is actually a Dyson sphere. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's actually pretty interesting, but it's actually a Dyson sphere that was used as a method to seed the earth with humans and protect them from AI that had decided AI that humans had built that decided it was going to wipe out all organic life. And what that does is it kind of touches on what we've talked about with science fiction a lot, but it also turns mankind into God, as mankind is their own God who has created their own devil that's trying to kill them. And it's just like, when that got revealed, because initially the movie was interesting, I was like, well, this is kind of stupid, but it's an interesting idea. I don't find the movie compelling, but the notion of, what do you do if the moon suddenly just, is trying to crash into the earth, it's a fun question to play with. But as soon as they revealed that, I was just like, this is just another symptom of how godless of a culture we are. Like, we are our own gods, and we've created the devil, and we don't even care. We're only like, oh, well, now we need to destroy the devil. It's like, well, we're not gods, so we can't do that.
Yeah, why'd you go and create it in the first place?
But also, yeah, it's just very self-aggrandizing and very arrogant, and I hated every minute of it. And in the life of St. Brendan, you see the complete inverse of that, I think.
Yeah. Real quick, 2 new Patreon members as we were doing this. Shout out to Brendan Jenkins.
Happy feast day. Well, it's not your feast day yet for another 2 weeks-ish.
Brendan.
It's
close enough.
Close enough.
Daniel, thank you. I'll give a shout out to everybody real quick. Nicole, Katie, Joshua, James, Stephanie, big shout out. Ethio, Wade, Mitch, Catherine, Robert, Jay, Anders, and the homie Ian, John. We'll use your baptismal name now.
Well,
thank you guys.
His baptismal name and his given name are exactly the same, just
Yeah.
in different languages.
So we got a few more Patreon
Glory to God. Thank you guys.
subscribers. So
All right. Make sure I've got this set up appropriately.
here, let me go ahead and put an image of St. Bede up real quick.
Okay. This isn't the touchscreen one, is it?
Nope, that's what I was.
Okay.
Are you gonna be able to see it with your old man eyes?
I was just looking for a way to scroll, but yeah.
I can scroll for you.
Okay.
I'll keep you.
Well, and then when one of us is just running our mouths, then you can try to find that Tolkien poem.
Perfect. Works for me. So here I've added a photo of Saint Bede. It's a venerable
Icon.
Thanks, Nathan.
You're welcome. Okay, so on that note, I have to tell a hilarious story. I don't know if anyone on here likes old British comedy. But there's a show called Blackadder, which is Rowan Atkinson playing a member of the same family from the Battle of Bosworth Fields through the end of World War One, and it just takes place in various political or cultural epics that are interesting. So you get Queen Elizabeth, you get who else? So you've got Queen Elizabeth, you've got King George III, various things like that. It's really funny. And also, if you watch that, you will never be able to watch Hugh Laurie the same again, because Hugh Laurie in Blackadder is just a complete and utter putz. But there's this great scene when, I think it's one of the Elizabethan ones, when Blackadder's severely in debt to the church and owes the Church of England, or at that point, yes, it's Elizabethan, so he owes the Church of England a tremendous amount of money that he can't possibly repay. And so this bishop shows up who's just a terrible bishop. He's very worldly, terrible, hedonist, violent, just terrible. And he shows up and says, hey, so you have until tonight, until sundown, to pay this debt back, and if you don't, we're going to kill you. And he's doing all this crazy stuff to try to figure out how to pay it back, and eventually he realizes he can't. Like, he's known that from the beginning, but he realizes towards the end, he's like, there's actually no way this is going to happen. And so they then come up with this scheme to blackmail the bishop. When he shows up to kill Blackadder, they knock him out, and they put him in Blackadder's bed, and then they get one of Blackadder's friends, who happens to be a guy, to do all these things to him. You don't see any of it, but the way they record this is they have the closest thing to Leonardo da Vinci in England paint all these things as they're happening. Instead of taking a photo.
Instead of selfies?
Yeah, that's how they blackmail the bishop.
Is it based on a true story?
No, it's just ridiculous comedy, but it's really funny because they show him the painting. The bishop's like, I'm going to kill you for doing this. I can't believe you did this. And he goes, yes, but what if this painting got out? And they're like, no one will ever believe that. And he's like, but they will, because here's the people that are in it, and here's what all you did. And he's like, crap. And he's treating it like it's a photograph, and it's really, really funny.
What's that called?
It's called Blackadder.
It's a short...
It's a show. It's I want to say it went for 4 or 5 seasons.
Cool.
But they're only 7 episodes a season.
Cool.
But it's really funny.
Are you telling me how you're going to blackmail me?
Get the closest thing to Leonardo da Vinci in the United States to paint you doing something sketchy.
Well,
I mean, I don't know how.
That's going to be fairly easy to find me doing something sketchy. So.
I could just look through your
history.
Social media history. If I was so motivated, which I am not.
All right, so here we have an icon of the Venerable Bede, and Nathan is going to read the hagiography that we have, and we'll touch on it a little bit.
Okay, so the Venerable Bede, born May 25th in 672, reposed roughly on the same day in 735, was a monk at the Northumbrian monastery of St. Peter at Warmouth. And of its daughter monastery, St. Paul's in modern Jarrow. He's well known as an author and a scholar, whose best known work is the Ecclesiastical History of the English People, which gained him the title of the Father of English History. St. Bede wrote on many topics, from music and musical metrics to scripture commentary. His feast day is observed on May 25th, 26th, or 27th, depending on the sources used by your calendar. So, stereotypical Orthodox confusion about dates.
Yeah. When do we start our fast again? Oh,
Depends on
yesterday?
what calendar you're using. Almost all that is known of his life is contained in a notice added by himself to his History of the English People, which states that he was placed in the monastery of Warmouth at the age of 7, and that he became deacon in his 19th year and a priest in his 30th year, remaining a priest for the rest of his life. It is not clear if he was from noble birth or not. He was trained by the abbots Benedictine Bishop and Kelfrid, probably accompanied the latter to Jarrow in 682. There he spent his life, finding his chief pleasure in always being occupied in learning, teaching, or writing, and was zealous in the performance of monastic duties. He became known as the Venerable Bede soon after his death, and his holy relics are raised in a tomb at one end of the cathedral in Durham, England. His works show that he had at his command all of the learning of his time. It was thought that the library at Warmouth Jarrow was between 300 and 500 books, making it one of the largest in England. It is clear that Biscop made strenuous efforts to collect books on his extensive travels, and Bede was proficient in patristic literature and quotes from Pliny the Younger, Virgil, Lucretius, Ovid, Horace, and other classical writers, but with some disapproval. He knew Greek and a little Hebrew. His Latin is clear and without affectation, and he is a skillful storyteller. Bede practiced the allegorical method of interpretation and was by modern standards credulous concerning the miraculous, but in most things his good sense is conspicuous, and his kindly and broad sympathies, his love of truth and fairness, his unfeigned piety, and his devotion to the service of others combined to make him an exceedingly attractive character. The Venerable Bede's commentaries on Holy Scriptures owed much to other patristic sources, as he often inserted long quotations from other Latin fathers, especially St. Gregory the Great, St. Augustine of Hippo, and St. Jerome. In addition to 2 books of homilies on the gospel pericopes of the liturgical year, the great monk of Weymouth's surviving works include verse-by-verse commentaries on the Acts of the Apostles, the 7 Catholic epistles, the explanation of the Apocalypse. His commentaries on the Pauline epistles are contained in the Biblical Miscellany. He also compiled St. Augustine's commentary on the Pauline epistles into a single volume that follows their order in our present canon. His allegorical interpretations of the Old Testament survive in 2 works, on the Temple and on the Tabernacle. Bede's writings are classed as scientific, historical, and theological. The scientific includes treatises on grammar, a work on natural phenomena, and 2 on chronology. Bede made a new calculation of the age of the earth and began the practice of dividing the Christian era into BC and AD. Interestingly, Bede wrote that the earth was round like a playground ball, contrasting that with being round like a shield. The most important... Go ahead.
He's wrong. The Earth's flat.
I really thought you were going to have something interesting to say there. I don't know why I wasn't expecting sarcasm. The most important and best known of his works is the Ecclesiastical History of the English People, giving it in 5 books of about 400 pages. The history of England, ecclesiastical and political, from the time of Caesar to the date of its completion in 731. The first 21 chapters, treating on the period before the mission of St. Augustine of Canterbury, are compiled from earlier writers such as Orosius, Gildas, Prosper of Aquitaine, the letters of Pope Gregory the Great, otherwise known as St. Gregory the Dialogist, whom we've talked about before, and others with the insertion of legends and traditions. After 596, documentary sources, which Bede took pains to obtain, are used in oral testimony, which he employed not without critical consideration of its value. He cited his references and was very concerned about the sources of all his sources, which created an important historical chain.
Fact-checking. I like it.
He is credited with inventing footnoting. Interesting. I did not actually know that. His re-editing of the Bible was important and was used by the Roman Catholic Church until 1966. He did not copy any one source, but researched from several sources to create a single volume. His other historical works were the Lives of the Abbots of Weymouth and Jarrow, and the Life in Verse and Prose of St. Cuthbert of Lindisfarne.
Nice.
The most numerous of his writings are theological and consist of commentaries on the books of the Old and New Testament, homilies, and treatises on detached portions of Scripture. He also composed a number of hymns, and his last work, completed on his deathbed, was a translation into Anglo-Saxon of the Gospel of John. And here's a famous quotation from him. "Better a stupid and unlettered brother who, working the good things he knows, merits life in heaven, than one who, through being distinguished for his learning in the Scriptures, or even holding the place of a doctor, lacks the bread of love." That's
Yeah, I like
That's a
that.
pretty good quote. That's
Yeah.
a really good quote.
And here I've inserted a photo, not an icon, of the tomb of Venerable Bede, which is located in the Durham Cathedral of England. So that would be where the relics are.
Interesting. I will say, I feel rather, and this has nothing to do with his life. I've liked the Venerable, like, I remember being like 13 years old and in a high school history textbook finding a quotation that said, "Oh yeah, and here's this source of English history, medieval English history, and it was written by this guy called the Venerable Bede." And I was like, "Well, that's a really freaking interesting name. Like, I want to know more about this guy." And to be fair, I didn't do a whole lot of looking until later in life, but um, I've always found him to be interesting as long as I've known about him, just because that's, I mean, it's curious to end up with the epithet venerable. You know, you've got to do something interesting.
Yeah, so here I can throw this in the description: a book of hymns, rhythms, and various prayers of the Venerable Bede. Um,
On the 6 ages of the world.
on Lent, on the resurrection of the Lord, on the birth of Saint Agnes, on the birth of the innocents. Yeah, hymn of the priest Bede, on the work of the 6 primordial days, and on the 6 ages of the world. So pretty interesting stuff.
I do, like I said, though, have some trepidation about the notion of footnoting, because that seems to me like I would almost go so far as to say that in many ways makes him the first scholastic. But
Yeah, good point.
But either way, he's a saint and a doctor of the church, so.
So here, even like we see that it says he was born January 1st, 673, and died May 25th. So I'm not sure if there's some discrepancy on
Right.
feast day or born days. I mean, back then there wasn't like, it was a little bit harder to keep track of exactly when someone was born up,
Right.
to the day and time. People weren't as obsessed with like their zodiac symbols or the day and time they were born, so they could
People often
know their horoscope.
didn't know their own birthday. They would know their name day, though.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Tells you some important things about society. But I will say, having read portions of the ecclesiastical history, he's a really good storyteller. He writes that very, very well, and he does you can tell that he's extremely familiar with Old Testament theology, as we would call it now, but with the patterns of the Old Testament is maybe a better way of putting it.
So there's this book, Bede's Ecclesiastical History of England.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But he will often say that the Britons were being punished for their obsession with Pelagianism. He would say that's why the Anglo-Saxon invasions occur. He more or less says
Interesting.
that. He goes, yeah, if you guys weren't so obsessed with Pelagius, and if the Pope didn't have to keep sending people to talk you out of Pelagianism, then the Anglo-Saxons wouldn't have invaded. Or at least they wouldn't have been as sketchy as they were.
Yeah, I'll have to get that book. Do you have it?
I do.
Cool.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, well, it's about all we have for today. We wanted to do a few hagiographies and a little update on the Patreon and on some other ventures that we're working on. So with that being said, if you guys have any saints that you'd like us to discuss, read on their lives, gives us an opportunity, like I've said, to learn more, just as we did today. Nathan, any final thoughts?
I'll be praying for us that we're able to serve God in everything that we do, and that the podcast, the YouTube videos, whatever it is that we do, also the publishing branch will go well, and that Ian and I will be able to do our little part for the kingdom of God.
Yeah, just pray that it, may it be blessed.
Yeah.
As many people say, but especially Father Nectarios at the monastery all the time. May it be blessed.
That I broke my leg, and he would say, "May it be blessed."
May it be blessed. So yeah, with that being said, thanks. Stay tuned for the next episode. I'm going to get a calendar together pretty soon of all the interviews. The interview I did with Father Jarmus will be up this week. I thought we had another one to release, but I actually realized
we did the Dancing with Death, God of Pronouns, Shaisa.
So we'll do part 2 of TikTok this week.
I am so not looking forward to that.
I'm so not looking forward to it either.
I'm glad that you're finally feeling my suffering.
Yeah.
What was it that who was it that said, Watching this is like
Oh yeah,
watching someone.
John.
How did he phrase that?
He said, showing that this is like showing something to someone who doesn't have the internet.
Yeah,
God bless him.
yeah.
In referring to Nathan, because how Nathan, if you haven't seen it, if you're not on Patreon, subscribe to Patreon. Our reactions, to be honest, were not planned at all.
Ian's got some good ones. I mean, like mine are a little more overt. Flipping my hat off, throwing my glasses across the room, stuff.
Mine
like
are
that.
dumbfounded.
But Ian, like, there's one when, if you've ever had a dog and you act like you're gonna throw a treat to him, but you don't, or something like that, and how their eyes get super big real fast. They just pop open for a second and then kind of close. Ian does that like a dozen times. Somebody will say something and he just goes. It's pretty wonderful.
And I've found worse ones.
What?
Told you I couldn't sleep last night. Maybe that's why.
You could have read.
Nope.
You could have listened to anything else.
Felt like
You
torturing
could have
myself.
prayed.
I mean, I did. Oh, trust me, I prayed.
I mean,
So, yeah.
you could have done anything else. Like when I have trouble sleeping, I don't go watch TikToks. I actually don't really get on the internet, but to validate Paul's point or John's point. Yeah, John.
Pope John Paul. All right, guys. Have a blessed week, and we will see you soon.
Cheers. God bless.
God bless.